set of Universal Design Guidelines. Thank you. And how these are beginning to be implemented into new development projects around Portland. Our guests today are Brian Squillace, architect at Bora Architecture and Interiors, Jesse Vargo, an architectural designer at Bora Architecture and Interiors, and then Jill Cabral Shin, strategic partnerships director, my goodness, at Community Vision. We only have an hour and our speakers have a lot to share, so we're going to ask you to hold time for questions at the end. However, please feel free to put questions in the chat and we'll do our best to get to all of them. And then we'll also be recording today's session to share out for those who weren't able to make it. And with that introduction, I'll pass it over to Jill to get us started. Thanks.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Jill Cabral Shin. There you go. I think we're going to pop up here. Great. And I'm from Community Vision, and I'll give you a quick background of who Community Vision is, and then dive into universal design, why that's important, and why that's important, especially for people with disabilities as well. Go ahead, Brian. Community Vision was started in 1989 to help people move out of the state-run institution of Fairview Training Center. And this was progressive at the time to help people live amidst the community. And unfortunately, as many of you know, it still is today. And so we're really trying to tackle that issue. And we believe that people with disabilities should be accepted, included, and able to live the life they choose. We have 4 programs that do that. We have supported living, which is helping people live in their home independently. We do employment support and job coaching. We have an assistive technology lab. I like to always give a plug for that. It is on site at our building. You can come check things out. We're open every Thursday to the public from 12 to 5. We give tours. We have a loan closet. Assistive technology is anything that helps someone do a task better. So from pencil grips to high-end communication devices and wheelchair and everything in between. And then our housing program, which helps people with disabilities find affordable apartments. All our services are one-on-one and based on the life and intentions of each individual. And everyone is different, so everyone has different needs. And consistently in our 36 years of service, we have heard that people with disabilities want to live independently. They want a home of their own. And there are 3 barriers to that: affordability, accessibility, and stigma. And so the first one, affordability. The majority of apartments that are considered affordable, and I'm sure a lot of you know this stuff I'll cover on this, but are not affordable for people with disabilities, many of whom live on $943 a month with SSI benefits. And the minimum monthly income to be considered affordable is $5,380. Obviously, a big gap there. And there also just is a lack of extremely low income apartments. Again, I'm sure you know that. For every 10 extremely low income households, there are just 3 homes. So we really aren't meeting the need, especially for those who need it most. And next slide, Brian. And for Americans with disabilities, about 1% of rental units are actually accessible. And 1 in 4 Americans has a disability, and 1 in 8 has a walking difficulty. This is obviously going to increase as our population ages. So really thinking about how those people are going to move forward in their life. They need accessibility. Sorry, I just lost the, there we go, now I see it. Go ahead, Brian, next slide. We've also seen that stigma affects people being able to live independently as well. We're not thinking about the disability population when we're planning for apartments, and that's really something that needs to shift. As you can see here with fair housing complaints, the red line is disability, the blue is race, and the green is sex. Disability complaints have continued to rise over the years, and just a clear sign that we really need to address accessibility. People with disabilities are people too, and Jesse, you said this once that, planning for people with disabilities shouldn't be extra. They're just people. So really starting to shift into that mindset. Go ahead, Brian, next slide. To address these major barriers to housing, we as Community Vision do individual services, so helping people get into apartments, advocacy, working at the local and legislative level, and then capacity building as well. So teaching people about accessibility and the needs of people with disabilities, and then training other groups to do what we do. And this is how we ended up in the universal design world. We were getting people into apartments, but we could see that there were still barriers. Like clearly buildings are not designed for people with disabilities. There are ADA guidelines, but those don't cover individual units. And a lot of times, those are paid attention to at the beginning of a project. But a lot of things change. We were getting people into apartments and trash rooms weren't accessible. There were steps leading out to roof decks. And it was just really challenging still, even when places were supposed to be accessible. So it was really clear to us that the ADA was not meeting the basic needs of people it was supposed to cover. Why universal design matters. All people will face disability in our lifetimes. I'm sure there are a lot of you out there who have broken an arm or a leg, who have been pregnant and needed to, or had a kid and needed to push a stroller around. There's always things that come up in our life, or have an aging parent who now needs to stay in their own home. If we plan now for people aging in place, then we're not displacing people in a time of crisis. It's also beneficial for people when they're have moved here and are learning English, for flexibility of use as people's need change, and just dignity for all people. The more that people can just move throughout a place without barriers, the more they feel like they're home. It's also better long-term value to keep residents safe and stable and not needing expensive retrofits or accommodations down the line. Next slide. However, we know that universal design, accessibility freaks people out. It makes people think about dollar signs and, things looking clinical and like ugly grab bars. It doesn't have to be that way. The more that we can think about universal design as meeting everyone's needs, if it's done well, everyone benefits and no one notices. And there are lots of low or no cost options that make that space usable and usable for the long term and don't look clinical. Go ahead. That is where the ADA guidebook came in, and we will give you all the link to this at the end. Brian and Jesse and I worked on this project because we really felt like there was a need for people to just get a quick primer on what is universal design, why is it important, and how can I implement it in a way that really works for our project and will benefit all residents as well. So I'll go through some of my favorite low and no cost examples. And you can dig into the guidebook later too. My 5 low or no cost examples are the front entrance. Everyone should be able to feel welcome. There shouldn't be, a giant ramp to the accessible entrance. There shouldn't be, the accessible entrance is in the back near the dumpster. Everyone should just be able to enter at the front of the building. You also shouldn't make the people with disabilities and barriers like go farther to the entrance. Color contrast of material, thinking about how someone with low vision would experience the space. I have a friend who tells a story of, she's a person with low vision. She walks in to a room with, kind of neutral flooring and neutral chairs, neutral furniture, and all this diffused light, which is lovely, but she can't see anything. So just thinking about your materials and how someone would be able to perceive a space. Switches and plugs. This is a really easy way to give people more access. If you just move your plugs or your switches to 46 inches and your plugs up to 18, just makes it really easier to reach, and that doesn't cost anything extra. Words and icons on all signage. You're making signage anyway. If you have words and icons, then people who are, children, people who are non-native English speakers, people who have developmental disabilities can process that signage in a better way. And then D-poles and levers, making sure that there's easier access. It's just like those poles that are like a kind of square or like something you can grab onto instead of a knob is a D-pole. Go ahead, Brian. And then kitchens and bathrooms are a super important place for access. Like I mentioned, the ADA does not cover individual units. So really thinking about how someone with a wheelchair, and now there are big power wheelchairs. So ADA guidelines are out of date. There, a 3-foot turning radius is not enough for my friend who is 6'4", 6'5", and in a power wheelchair. Like 3 feet just doesn't cut it. And he usually has a person to help him as well. So a 5-foot turning radius in your bathroom and kitchen, 32-inch wide doorways in all units. This allows people to visit other units so he can, people can go see their friends and not worry about being able to get in there or move around the space. And 36-inch wide doorways for max access. Just a quick story about Jenny. She lived in a place that was not accessible beforehand. She couldn't leave her apartment alone. She couldn't move around her apartment alone, and she couldn't get out into her community. And now you see these pictures of her. She's in her new apartment, and she's able to move about her apartment. She goes to her local drum circle. It's just absolutely changed her life that she now can just move about her apartment and about her building without a barrier. She had her birthday party in the common room, which was really cool. And it's more than just physical space. The more that people can face the least amount of barriers, as I mentioned before, there's more dignity. Thinking about people moving around the space. How are you conveying information about floor numbers and where different things are? Cultural norms, making sure you have kitchens that can be used for halal preparation. Safety, which I think Jesse will talk about later, but thinking about how people are getting through crises, how people are getting down the stairs in an emergency, and then meeting basic needs, thinking about, especially for parks or other public spaces, things like adult changing tables. Go ahead. This is one of the great things for public communication access. This is one of the things that actually gets left out quite a bit, is how people communicate, and people with communication barriers sometimes just need a different tool or need a little bit longer to communicate. This is an example of a communication board that is at a local park, and it just has letters and icons so people at the park can use that to communicate. And then I'll share the information about Australia's SCOPE program with you as well. I'm just sharing a couple funding options. The CUNY Foundation has funding for accessible building. So does the Fairview Trust. Those are both geared directly for people with disabilities and creating more accessible housing. And then OHCS also has a $200,000 incentive. And as I'm sure you all know about PSEF funding, I feel like that's always a place to lean into. Really, the more we can dovetail sustainability, accessibility, like all of those community needs and do those things together, the more that we'll achieve change. Go ahead. And then just a plug for some policy alignment that I hope everyone will look into and hopefully support. We want to pass SB 444. We just got our committee vote meeting for April 2nd, which is super exciting. We thought that one might die given the current state of the world. But that is requiring 10% of units to be fully accessible. It would also be helpful to build more housing like ADUs and other creative solution just by streamlining that permitting process. And then expanding rent assistance. As you saw from those numbers before, even affordable units aren't affordable. So rent assistance is really a way to make sure we can get people into safe and stable housing. Next one. This is always one of my favorite sides to talk about. You have the power to make change. Universal design is critical to alleviate the housing crisis and means independence for people with disabilities. People can grow up and grow old in their community. Accessibility should be the standard, not extra. The more that we can just make sure status quo is actually serving everyone, the better that will be for all of us. And designing for long-term planning are catalysts for inclusion. You can be an activist through design. And I think we'll share our stuff at the end too.
Sounds great. Thanks, Joe. Again, I'm Brian Scolace with Bora. I just want to maybe start for a moment by sharing two gratitudes. First, Jill to Community Vision. I think that Community Vision has been such an impactful partner for Bora over the last 6 years, 5 years. We've been working together now on a handful of different projects, not just the design guidebook, quite a few affordable housing projects. We've talked about K-12 schools. We've talked about libraries, quite a few different things. And I think that they've really allowed us as designers to open our eyes in new ways. Designers thrive with constraints, and we do our best work when we understand the people who are going to be using the spaces we're designing. Why do the design work if we're not trying to make it for everybody and make it ways that people are going to enjoy? And I think these conversations have just been incredibly rewarding, not just for myself, but across our staff. And I would hope that as you're working with other design teams, builders, developers, these are opportunities to have more meaningful conversations. We make decisions every day that have to do with us spending money, with you spending money, and we can either make those decisions with intention or without understanding the ramifications fully of them. And I think there's just an opportunity to apply that intention. And my second brief gratitude is for all of you. I am so grateful today to be living in Portland, in a city where this many people will show up for a conversation that I think is this important. So the world is what the world is, our country is what our country is, but Portland is flipping awesome. So I'm so glad that you all are here. And with that, I'm going to speak briefly about kind of our design practice. We're a firm solely located here in Portland, architecture, interiors, environmental graphics. We are about 65, 68 people right now, working across mostly public sectors, K-12 libraries, affordable housing, performing arts. And then Jesse is going to zoom in a little bit more and speak specifically about one of the developments that we currently have under construction in Southeast Portland, that is affordable housing. So from a firm and practice standpoint, as designers, equity touches everything we do. To Jill's point, sustainability and resilience are critically important and touch everything that we do, and all of these things are intersectional. And we talk about them across scales, as you can see on this slide. And I think that universal design, accessibility in particular, is often talked about at that human scale. How's it going to impact me? How's it going to impact you? How's it going to impact this one person? To me, the opportunity as a designer is to actually scale that up and think about the opportunity, the dignity that these decisions provide or allow, so that individuals can participate at that community scale. And to me, that's the real value in having these conversations, is not just supporting the individual, but really building a more inclusive society where people can participate in different ways. As Jill talked about, universal design is really broad. It's not just accessibility. It's not just serving disabled communities of one type or another. It really touches on a wide array of strategies. I'm not going to go through all of these right now, but there's more detail on these in the Universal Design Guidebook that we'll certainly share out. Cultural appropriateness, I also notice, is missing from this slide. So that's something we need to add in as well. So the conversation expands, right? The more we have it, the more we realize the things that we haven't thought about. And I'm excited for the end of this session to hear from some of you on where you're seeing as challenges and opportunities, and where we're maybe not thinking about things clearly enough yet. Within our practice, we always start the conversation about what does universal design mean to this effort, right? This is not something that's codified. There are a million checklists out there. In my opinion, none of them are the perfect checklist. It's all about the community you're serving, the objectives that you have for that project, whether it's a park, an open space, a streetscape, a building, whatever it might be. We really have to start with engaging communities and understanding who we're working with, what their needs are, and that informs which tools we're going to implement, which levers we're going to provide, where we're going to spend those dollars that we do have. And that has to be an iterative cycle with the community to really understand, this is what we heard, this is what we're thinking, is this right? How do we adjust it? How do we improve it kind of as we go throughout? Not just day one, not just during construction, but kind of continually with those occupants, making sure that space is really serving them. And all of this with universal design in that top left corner is intersectional, as I said, right? This overlaps with designing and thinking about design, not just as visual beauty, not just as aesthetics, which is what many of us were trained when we went through design school, but thinking more broadly about designing for all of the senses, thinking about giving choice to people, thinking about connecting them to nature, the benefits of daylight and biophilia. All of these things overlap and inform and support universal design as we do think about equity and inclusion. And within our practice, this really spans those scales, right? Whether we're talking about a housing tower, or a library, or a high school, right down to the furniture that we're selecting, universal design, equity, inclusion really have opportunities to impact every single one of those decisions. All right, so this image on the screen here is a affordable housing development with Home Forward that's currently under construction on Southeast Clinton. And the conversations here that we had, not just with potential current residents and potential residents, but with the neighbors, was about the opportunities to have green space in the neighborhood as we're increasing density in the Richmond neighborhood, in the inner city Portland neighborhood. How do we increase the density and still provide open space and provide variety in that open space so that people can choose the ways that they want to engage and interact? This is a significantly sloped site. So just like water comes down a mountain, or a trail builder might plan a trail going up the mountain, you think about switchbacks. You think about ways to cut that grade in a way that can be beautiful, that can offer open space out to the neighborhood with these courtyards opening out, and still create an accessible path across that hill throughout, and then kind of weave the amenity spaces, indoor and outdoor community spaces, kind of amongst the building and the site, giving back to the neighbors, not just the residents, as we start to think about that. Just a rendering of that. This project is currently broken ground, so soon we'll have some photos to share. You can go walk the site yourself. One other example at kind of that largest scale as we start to think about this and how we set up a design opportunity. This is a site, 25-acre site in Clackamas County, all affordable housing, leveraging the new cottage cluster middle housing codes. And so this is 21 cottage clusters, roughly 221 units, I think, right now. We're in mid-design with this. Each of those cottage clusters is arranged around a pedestrian loop that is fully accessible. You can kind of see on the right side there, so that we're really creating space for residents that's separated from the vehicular spaces on site. That loop then connects different amenity spaces, indoor and outdoor community spaces. Neighbors can come in and through the site to use that loop. But again, it's really providing choice and taking the scale of a site that's so large and starting to think about different pedestrian experiences throughout that site. At a much smaller scale, again, every decision we make has impact. If we don't ask the questions, we don't necessarily understand the impact. We select furniture for the vast majority of the buildings that we design. You all sit in furniture every day that maybe was intentional or wasn't intentionally selected, or was selected for beauty rather than comfort, or one thing versus another. But again, we don't understand the impact of those selections unless we really engage the community and have those conversations. So this is some work that we recently did with the new Holgate Library, which is just reopened. If you haven't been, please go check out the Holgate Library. It's getting a ton of use and it's awesome. But the conversations there started with a whole bunch of community engagement and sit tests when it came to the furniture. We did engagement for the building, but we also did it with the furniture, where we set up surveys, where we invited people to come in to test out different types of furniture, where they could think about what it means to be in a public space and feel secure and be able to focus and study on a book or a computer, whatever they're using. Some people that want to fidget, some people that are smaller stature, bigger stature, kids, people that want to lay down, people that don't fit within standard furniture sizes, right? All of these different choices and opportunities that we had got to engage with to then understand what the impact of some of the selections we're going to make were going to be. And then again, it's not just about those selections day one, but it's how do we help the library staff in setting the space up each day, resetting the space as they close and reopen, and the furniture moves around to be sure that accessible clearances are maintained, be sure that the furniture kind of stays distributed in ways that allows people equal opportunity to use the different spaces in the library. So some of it is as easy as us providing a drawing for staff to kind of understand the use of the space long-term, beyond just day one. And then the best part of it is we get to go in these spaces. We get to see people sitting in the furniture and using this furniture in ways that we couldn't have possibly imagined, which just brings life to the space, and hopefully for them results in a more dignified opportunity to participate. with that, Jesse, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Brian. As Brian mentioned earlier, I'll be focusing more on one project that our firm is currently seeing in construction. This is an affordable housing project here in Southeast Portland off of Division near Southeast 82nd. It will be 124 units of affordable housing with twice as many type A accessible units as our code required. So that was a really big win for us. And the client is Our Just Future. They are developing this with property that PCC donated for the development, which is really incredible. And this location is in the Jade District, so a historically Asian community with a really vibrant culture and a lot of amenities nearby, including rapid transit on Division Street. So a lot of really great opportunities on this site. And for this project in particular, there wasn't a specific age group or cultural group in mind that we were serving or that our client was serving. And so for us, the questions really came as, how can we provide spaces for everyone? So spaces for people both to grow up in and grow old in, as Jill was talking about. And creating spaces that are empowering and can support and build resilient communities. So the site being off of Division Street and 77th has the main entry on Division with a central courtyard that opens up onto PCC's campus. So it really kind of blends together into one bigger site. And there were a lot of existing trees on this site that we really wanted to maintain. And so that was part of the kind of constraints of how we designed the layout of the building. And although the main entry is on Division, there's entries on all sides of the building. So it really kind of doesn't give it a true front or back and makes it feel more residential in scale, including having some walk-up unit entries on the exterior of the building as well. So this was, yeah, it's a really multifaceted site. And so we were trying to figure out how to play this balance of making it both feel residential and fit into the existing context of the neighborhood. One of the ways we did that, as well as provided a little more of a setback on 77th with a small courtyard. And we also provided a parking area to help alleviate kind of the amount of new residents that will be living on the site. So this is the first floor plan, and we've kind of flipped directions here. So Division is on the right-hand side, that's south. The main entrance there is covered. All of the entrances are covered, which was a really big focus in creating space that would be more comfortable for people as they're coming in and out or waiting to be picked up. Another thing that we provided throughout not just the ground floor, but the upper floors as well, is in the kind of red dash boxes, providing seating distributed throughout the floor plan, especially for such a long stretch. It's nice to create kind of smaller opportunities for gathering. And then the larger opportunities for gathering are highlighted in blue. Those inside the building. So there's a large community space that opens up out onto the courtyard, and that has views that connect into the playroom and the laundry room. So there's really views throughout, making the whole space feel more interconnected. And in the main courtyard, there's also a covered seating area and a play area. There's also a flex room, which can be used for a variety of different options. And the other idea is that it could also be used as a community space for maybe outside classes or educational sessions. So really creating opportunity for a lot of different uses for that. So as we were designing the site and specifically looking at the courtyards here, we were really focused on how to ensure that we were making decisions that weren't going to be leaving anyone out. And with this in mind, something that we paid a lot of attention to was the paving. And so in the courtyard, we have rollable surfaces. So we do have pavers, but we made sure that, you know, these pavers wouldn't be something that would become a barrier for anyone using the space, but still could provide some impervious surfaces. So in order to, you know, get water mitigation on the site, but we also provided a cork play surface for the play area. So even the play area has an accessible surface for, you know, any kids that might be in a wheelchair or anyone using mobility devices, or, you know, if caretakers are with children and need mobility devices, they can be out there on that playground as well. Another thing we focused on was ensuring that the furniture selection had accessible access, which I feel like can be overlooked often in public spaces. And like what Brian was talking about with furniture, it's something that is not really dictated by code. And so it can be really important for the designers to have input on those things to make sure that nobody is being left out of these community spaces. So this is the main community room off of that courtyard. And one thing that we were really focusing on as we were designing is, you know, how do we build community resilience? And this was coming from a lens of both universal design and also looking at the design choices we were making for the building. And so in the community room, we are providing a communal wheelchair charging station. There's also a variety of seating choices for choice and comfort, acoustic treatment for noise mitigation, and we've also visually connected the space to both the community spaces adjacent and to the outdoors. And we did try to focus on providing visual contrast and tactile materials. So another thing with material selection and contrast is building textures can also help folks with low vision. So that was, yeah, a great thing to get incorporated into the design. And so as we were doing engagement with community members on this project, the thing we kept hearing over and over again was, you know, providing a variety of spaces that are outside of the building units. So in building community space, truly inviting everyone to participate in whatever capacity they are able or wanting to engage in. is really, I think, the best thing that you can do. And so whether that's a more quiet space that's for a small group or an individual, or a large and active space, we did provide opportunities for a lot of choice and agency in how people engage. And in thinking of building in deeper accessibility and access, some of the things that we focused on were wayfinding through environmental graphic design and using placemaking and storytelling for wayfinding. So this was, it's not a finalized design, but the each level will have its own identity, which can help folks who may or may not know the building or be visiting. They'll be able to orient themselves better in the space without using, you know, signage or a lot of words. So this can be a great way to help make it more accessible. And pictured again is the wheelchair charging station. So this is in the community room where there are some other resilient measures, just making sure that that everyone can get around and not be worried about their power wheelchair running out of power if they're trying to go to their friend's birthday party in the community room, or they need to charge up before getting their ride and don't want to go back up to their unit. So just making sure that this is a really small device that is relatively low cost for the amount of dignity and usefulness that it will provide to tenants or guests. And a deeper accessibility item in thinking about emergency situations is these mobile stair lift chairs. So these are on the top floor of each egress stair, and these can be operated by a single person to help someone who may have mobility challenges or an injury that prevents them from egressing the building safely when the elevators would be out. And so these, yeah, it's just another way to think about how are we thinking ahead for emergency situations. And with deeper universal upgrades, something that we did in the design process was create kind of a menu of options for the unit designs that could be priced out by our contractor so that we could come back to these things if and when more resources were available, dependent on new funding opportunities. Since there are so many that come in affordable housing, it can be, you know, a little piecemeal. We don't always know when or how, and some of them pop up when, you know, in the 11th hour. So with planning ahead, we got pricing and valuation on these so that it could be something that would be easier to add back in when new funding was available. So designing for resilience, again, in thinking about emergency situations, we all remember the 2020 fires that happened here. And one focus of this building was building a really tight envelope. So this is designed to a passive house standard, which will keep a healthy indoor environment, even when it might look like that outside. And another resiliency measure was designing solar to backup battery. And the backup battery powers the wheelchair charging station in the community room. It also powers a mini fridge for medications. So I think that's something that, you know, it can impact people significantly. So making sure that even if there's a tiny refrigerator that can be run on backup power, it might be saving someone's life, including critical medical devices. So there's an additional plug dedicated for like anyone who might need to plug in a medical device in case of emergency in the community room. And the heating and cooling is focused in the community room as well. So that was a really big win. And I think actually it might be an even larger battery than we initially planned for, crossing our fingers, but we might have even more kind of backup power available in times of crisis for this community. So with universal design, I think the biggest things to keep in mind are you're designing with people in mind. You're thinking about how people are moving through these spaces in a day-to-day basis. And that one size doesn't fit all. So it's also an ongoing conversation and really deserves input from the people who you'll be impacting with the decisions that you're making. And engaging them in the conversation early and often, to Brian's point, is really important. So the physical and social resilience factor, we need both of them. And so if we can find opportunities where those overlap, that's like the biggest win. And again, advocating early and often for these universal design items or decisions. And it can be little things, but like that menu of options, we're setting our values early so that they don't get lost through the process of design, especially when we're working on affordable housing. You know, budget is always a topic of conversation and finding ways to save money. And so it can be really easy, especially for things like furniture or those things that can be scary and new with big dollar signs like a backup battery. Just setting that as a priority makes it harder to say that that's something that can't happen anymore. And now we'll open it up for questions and discussion. Just shouting out the Universal Design Guidebook again here. There's a link below to Community Vision's website where you can download this and have a copy for yourself. But we'd love to hear from you on any challenges or opportunities that you're experiencing on current projects. Is there anything we missed that you hoped we'd talk about? How can we enact change? I think Jill touched on a lot of those, but also just would love to hear from you all.
As we
It
gather
looks-
a question or two, I'm just going to note that I'll leave the screen up here for another minute, maybe. Please take down our email addresses, grab your screen clip, whatever you want. Reach out with any questions. We only have another 10, 12 minutes for questions here, but please contact Jesse or Jill or I. We're happy to continue the conversation. I will take this down in about a minute just so that you all can see our faces a little bit better, but I'll leave it up momentarily.
And I will say that Jill just dropped a link in the chat, that link to download the guidebook on Community Vision's website.
I also dropped in the link to the wheelchair charging station also as a plug for
Yes.
getting more of those out in the city. There's only 2 at our building, 1 and like 2 more across the city. So definitely need more of those.
And they make them in Pendleton, you said?
Make them in Pendleton. Yeah, it's a like
Right.
little, I would call that local for us.
Yeah.
It's
definitely.
$750, which seems like a super low cost to make sure people can move about the city and not get stuck out, doing appointments and doing whatever, or have to take that into account when planning their day that they're going to run out of battery. So
Looks like we have a shy audience, so I'm going to ask a question. So just thinking about the current state of housing and regulations, I'm curious, do you find most developers or private sector investors are receptive to conversations about accessible design and including these, many of them may see as extras into the design of a development, and yeah, an engaging community in these conversations. Just leave it there. And that's for any of the three of you. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, from a design standpoint, we don't get much, if any, pushback on these items. We center them as goals, like early on, and important values. And again, we're doing mostly public work. We don't do a lot of market rate developer driven work. But even within that, you're going to spend money on cabinet pulls anyways. You're going to locate your outlets anyways, right? So a lot of this really is cost neutral. When you're talking about adding a considerable number of additional accessible units beyond code requirements, yes, you're adding square footage to a building, but again, at the scale of a development, you're talking probably about less than 1-2% of the gross square footage of the building. So in my experience, if we're centering it early as a value, it hasn't been a challenge. That said, we're clearly underproducing units that we need. So somebody is not connecting the dots. And I think we all need to support some education and just being sure that we're doing more, because we're clearly not there. Jill, I don't know what you might have to add to that.
Yeah, I would say we primarily work with affordable housing developers, and I've seen that shift, in the last couple of years of us trying to get at the seat at the table, and now we're being invited to the table, and people want to have those conversations. And I really think, I love the way we talk about it, that it isn't, it's not just about people with disabilities. If you're building for people with the greatest barriers, you're planning for everyone's barriers at some point in their life. So it really isn't, this extra thing that we're doing to like be good. It's like, it's better for all of us. When you get old and need a wheelchair, now there are more units available. That's what it's about too, is the more that we can have accessible units available that are commonplace, that are affordable. People aren't on wait lists waiting for them. It's not something you're dealing with in a crisis. It's just, you either can still live in your apartment or like, hey, there's another one over here and you can move. So that's really planning for the long-term growth of the population and safety of all of us. And I like what you said at one of our last times too, talking about it, Jesse, that one of the projects you were actually able to do more because you just stacked those accessible units. So
Yeah,
it wasn't
that's this project. So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
Legion Commons. We provided 11% type A units on this project from the beginning. And, I think the other half is that there's opportunity for, yeah, having those units stacking, it can really reduce the complexity of the construction and can actually make it easier than if you were to choose to, not have those things stacking. So
Those are great. Thank you. We've got two questions, so I'm going to read the first one. This is from Liz Rickles. I sometimes get pushback from people at neighborhood associations or from neighbors about universal design. People can be afraid of loitering or people camping in communal spaces and sidewalks. Do you have any lines of argument you use in response to that type of pushback when you only have about 30 seconds or so to try and explain why this is important? It's a tricky one.
I think the fears that we come across, and some of this is very specific to affordable housing, clearly. It's a different conversation whether you're talking about a school or a library or affordable housing or market rate housing. But the fears are real, right? We hear lots and lots of fears, and those are based on people's past perceptions of what happens when you provide something for everybody, when you create public space or community space or amenity space. And my quick response, typically, I guess, if you're looking for how do you pitch that in 30 seconds, is that universal design is for everybody. It's for when you're carrying a bag of groceries. It's for when you're pushing a stroller. It's for when you break your leg. It's for people who have been disadvantaged by the systems that we have over generations. It's really for everybody. And to take that away from everybody because of a bad experience or something bad that could happen that hasn't happened yet just feels really unfortunate. And so we've got to kind of listen to those fears and then encourage people to be as open-minded as possible.
Yeah, that's a good argument. Okay, second question. And I know we have 5 minutes left, so we'll try to get through a few of these. Okay, from Morgan Tracy. I always love seeing great examples of projects that push the accessibility design best practices forward. As a regulator, I feel challenged to develop universal design requirements. Any other jurisdictions you've worked with that have good regulatory models, or is this the best approach, or is this best approach by peer design influence on the clients?
I'm happy to take this one too, I guess.
You're in, that's you.
We undervalue the social implications of design and community space in the United States. I think Portland is a leader in urban design, has been a leader in urban design for a long time, is a leader in a lot of ways from a social standpoint compared to our peer cities in other countries in Scandinavia and Japan and New Zealand. There are really great models for doing things differently, for issuing an RFP and really valuing social cohesion in the responses that we get, not just bottom lines. So I think from a RFP standpoint, the city has a good amount of leverage in certain spaces. From a legislative standpoint, and how do we codify these things? It's a little harder because checklists don't quite work in the same way, right? So you've got to kind of lead, I think, with a carrot and not a stick on some of this. I haven't seen a great municipality that comes to mind that's really leading from a regulatory standpoint with these things. Not to say you couldn't, OHCS provides funding and requires sustainability initiatives for every project that they fund. So similarly, you could require and codify above and beyond like Community Vision is trying to do at the state level right now. Whether it's a checklist from the Kelsey Foundation or other strategies or a pick your own path kind of thing, you could certainly do that and it would be innovative. And I'd be happy to brainstorm how we could do that better together.
Okay, we have time for one more. From Leah Espinoza. Is it easier, better, or cheaper to incorporate universal design in new builds and existing infrastructure? It seems this is a common reason for not addressing existing issues, especially from government agencies with limited funding like Portland Parks and Rec. For example, it is sometimes better to tear out and install a fully new playground restroom building versus making smaller repairs and adjustments, but it can take a long time to wait on funding for that larger project.
I think the answer to this is yes, it's easier to do it on new buildings. And so really leaning into that as you're engaging in the design process or to Brian's point, putting out that RFP, setting the values early. Because that, especially when, we're have clients pulling together funding from all sorts of different places. It's a patchwork. And so having that from the beginning is usually the easier way to go. However, there is funding available for renovation projects specifically. I think Jill has more information on some of those and has definitely advocated more in the housing space of like, what are the upgrades that might be less of a barrier to integrate now to an existing facility or housing project. And also, we've been working on helping clients look at some of their existing housing portfolios to pinpoint those things too. And it can be, a lot harder to do in existing buildings, but not impossible. So
Yeah, it seems like there's levels of implementation that can be done.
exactly. And anything that you can do can, even if it's a small upgrade, it can really help someone in their, day-to-day life or use of that space. So
Okay.
small impacts can make a really big change too.
Yeah. All right, you all. Well, we are at time. Thank you so much to our three presenters for bringing all of this to us today. I know we've tapped the three of you for some future conversations, at least at BPS. So looking forward to learning more. And as I said, they put their information in the chat, and feel free to reach out if you want to connect. And look forward to seeing you all later. All right.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone, very
everyone.
much.